Hello, my loves. Today we're going to look at some more Reddit stories, and if you've enjoyed a Reddit story, why don't you consider hitting the subscribe button? Maybe that's the notification bell too, and let's start with today's story. I visited a cult who kept their leader's body wrapped in Christmas lights and covered in glitter. I barely escaped with my life. The first time I saw Mother God, she lay in a blue sleeping bag, her face covered in glitter, her eyes missing. Someone had wrapped Christmas lights around her desiccated corpse, and now they strobed and twinkled merrily. Mother God is in stasis, a calm voice said from behind me. I turned, seeing Hope had followed me into the room. She was one of Mother God's most fanatical followers. She is taking all the poisons from the universe into her body. Soon, she will wake up and lead us towards ascension. You must hug Mother God, a deep male voice demanded. Through the shadows of the hallway, I saw Llama, a hulking mass of red hair and muscle. He held a pistol in one steady hand. She will take away your doubts and anxieties. I'm not hugging a goddamned corpse, I spat angrily, wondering how I kept getting into these bizarre situations. How come you guys didn't call a doctor when she was dying? What the hell is wrong with you people? Mother God is not dead. Llama screamed in an insane voice. How could God possibly die? And why would we call a three-dimensional doctor, anyway? Mother God is a five-dimensional being. They wouldn't even know where to start, Hope said, her eyes wide and gleaming. Llama nodded in fanatical agreement. I wondered where the rest of them were. I looked around, trying to find a way out. I knew they had my 2-year-old son downstairs, playing with the other kids who lived at the compound. If you don't hug Mother God, you will be recycled into the galactic center, Llama said, pointing the pistol in the middle of my forehead. He wore some strange combination of a shawl and a poncho, the once colorful material now dull and fraying. I could smell the sage and weed permeating his clothes. Llama looked at me with eyes the faded green color of swamp water. His long beard looked far greasier than the last time I had seen him, his skin sunken and gray. I turned, staring down at the mummified corpse. The papery flesh hung tightly to the grinning skull. The lips had been eaten away, showing yellowed, cracked teeth. The nose, too, had collapsed into the center of the face. 2 ragged sinus holes covered in dried yellowish pus and clotted blood marked the spot. The smell emanating from Mother God's desiccated body was sickening, a combination of cinnamon, feces, and rotting meat. Do it, Llama demanded, shoving the barrel of the pistol into the small of my back. A sharp stabbing pain shot up my spine as I stumbled forward. Do it, Hope repeated in her droning, emotionless voice. I looked down at the corpse sprawled across the floor. Inhaling deeply, I held my breath and lowered myself down on my knees. Mother God's grinning, half-decayed skull almost looked like it was trying not to laugh. I held my breath so as to avoid inhaling the rank odors rising from the decomposing body. Hesitantly, I leaned forward, extending my trembling hands towards Mother God. I wrapped my arms around the sleeping bag, hugging the corpse gently. I wanted to avoid releasing any more gas bubbles, as the entire room already smelled of infection and shit. Mother God's thin arms cracked like dry chicken bones. Black fluid dribbled from her mouth, reeking of sewerage and bacteria. I closed my eyes, trying not to vomit. Isn't it beautiful? Hope asked as I pushed myself up, wavering on my feet and trying not to puke. She stroked her long brown hair over and over, as if trying to calm herself down. Can't you feel all the love radiating off of her? She is the center of everything, the storehouse of compassion. I nodded, continuously swallowing all the saliva flooding my mouth to try to keep from retching in front of these insane fanatics. The smell of feces and rot seemed to have grown stronger in the room. I remembered the children on the floor below us and felt a rising sense of horror as I realized they had been living in this house with a corpse for weeks. I need to go check on Davy, I whispered, feeling my heart racing. Everything seemed unreal, as if I were trapped in a nightmare. Llama stood like a statue, the pistol pointed down by his side. His eyes were half closed, as if he were in some sort of stupor. Hope crept up behind him, putting her long fingers on his shoulder. Llama's eyes flew open as if he had just woken up. "Davy is fine," he said in a robotic monotone. "Everything is fine. We are one. We are one." Hope repeated excitedly. "All one." "Okay," I whispered slowly, looking between the two of them. "I'm going downstairs then." I took a step toward the door. A moment later, I heard the floorboards creaking. I glanced back, seeing Hope and Llama following closely behind me, whispering to each other in low, conspiratorial voices. Even in the sprawling living room downstairs, the cloying smell of dead flesh followed us. I saw Davy sleeping on a beanbag next to a little girl, looking as peaceful as a tiny angel. "Did you guys see Mother God?" another girl named Aurora asked. She was laying on the couch next to a smoking glass bung. "She is still in stasis," Hope answered grimly, her eyes sad and downcast. "She has not yet awoken to lead us into ascension." Aurora sat up, flicking a lighter and filling up the bong with thick, gray smoke. The skunky smell did nothing to cover up the reek of decaying meat, however. It seemed to combine with it into something even more nauseating and sickening than before. I had not come here for no reason, though I now regretted bringing Davy. My brother, Lee, had been missing for nearly a month. The last time I heard from him, he told me about making new friends in this laid-back compound where everyone ate mushrooms and talked about spirituality all the time. Then his phone shut off, and he seemed to just disappear. I wasn't too worried, to be honest, as Lee was a full-grown man and could take care of himself. But after 5 weeks, my mother and father begged me to try to find him and make sure he was okay. Now that I was here, I wasn't confident that he was. I wondered how to bring up the subject to these nutjobs. "Hey, you guys aren't holding prisoners in the basement like some kind of Gary Heidnik horror house, are you?" "I'm sorry, I'm being rude," Aurora said, turning her dark eyes to me. Like Hope, her face was caked in far too much makeup and had a somewhat blocky, unattractive quality. Her nose was just slightly too big, her forehead too high, her cheekbones too bony. Other than Aurora's hair, which was dyed pink and black, she might have been twins with Hope. She raised the bong to me. "You said you're friends with Lee, right? Do you want a hit?" I waved my hand in front of my chest. "No, I'm good," I said. "Actually, Lee's my brother. He dropped off the map a few weeks ago, and my parents just wanted to make sure he wasn't dead in a ditch somewhere." I didn't realize it at that moment, but things were about to get a lot stranger than they already were in the compound. I heard a shrill keening, rising in volume. It sounded like the cries of a panicked, injured animal. It drew closer. My head ratcheted over to stare at the basement door, which flew open. A naked woman with frayed strands of thick rope still tied to her wrists exploded through the threshold. She looked scarecrow thin, and her pale, white flesh covered in deep purple bruises and angry red gashes. "Help me," she cried, staring directly at me. The rest of the room went deathly silent. I heard the crying of Davy and the other children as they woke up, surprised by the sudden screaming and slamming. "What are you doing out of the learning room?" Llama asked in a voice seething with psychopathic coldness. She screamed and tried pushing past Llama and Hope, heading toward the door. Hope fell backwards, her eyes wide and surprised as she smacked her head hard on the dirty carpet. Llama was much faster, however. He reached for his holstered pistol. It came out in a black blur. He fired only once, hitting the woman in the center of the forehead. A small, perfectly round entrance wound appeared like magic. Her head jerked back, her hands clenching into fists. Her naked, battered body fell backwards as if in slow motion. She lay there, bleeding and twitching on the floor, her fingernails and lips turning blue. I heard a lighter flick and saw Aurora nonchalantly filling up the massive 4-foot-tall glass bung. Davy's small body stumbled across the room toward me, tears and snot streaming from his tiny, pinched face. I ran toward him, picking him up and hugging him. I felt the warmth radiating off of him as his arms closed around my neck. Turning, I decided I needed to leave immediately. I started heading toward the door without a word, but Llama stepped in front of it, his emerald eyes flashing with excitement and pleasure. "And just where the fuck do you think you're going?" he asked, a Cheshire cat grin splitting his bearded face. He ran his fingers through his fire-red hair, looking as calm and collected as a Buddha. "Don't you want to see your brother?" No, I think I'm good," I stuttered nervously. Llama put the hand with the pistol in it around my neck, leaning on me like an old friend. "He's here, you know," he whispered in a conspiratorial voice. "He wants to see you, too." "We can't let you leave until you see Lee," Hope said from behind me. She had crept up on me, and her voice was only inches away. I saw her holding a long, serrated knife covered with dark crimson stains by her side. The handle looked sticky with gore. "Why did you kill that girl?" I whispered, feeling Davy's rapid heartbeat beating through his shirt. I cradled my son in my arms protectively, but I was surrounded on all sides, the only exit blocked. Llama shook his head, looking like a disappointed parent. "She tried to escape and tell others about us," he said. "The world is not ready for us yet. Mother God has not awoken. We try to be compassionate here. If anyone tries to escape, they go to the learning room, where they can be taught anew." She was worthless anyway, Hope spat with hatred, prodding the still corpse of the naked woman with one shoe. Always complaining about how much she missed her family. This is our family now. The intergalactic family of love. Her eyes shone with fanaticism. "Do you want to see the learning room?" Llama asked coldly. "Is Lee down there?" I said. Llama shrugged. "Why don't we go see for ourselves?" he asked in response, jamming the barrel of the pistol into my stomach. Davy's crying had quieted to a soft whimpering. Carrying my son in my hands, I turned and walked across the room towards the stairs to the basement. The steps looked dank and wet, flat slabs of concrete descending into a dark pit. Llama followed close behind me as our steps echoed off the gray walls. I was surprised at just how deep this building went. We went down at least a couple stories in the claustrophobic concrete tunnel. At the bottom, I beheld a nightmarish scene. A single flickering incandescent bulb overhead cast the dungeon in a dim light. A naked man was tied in the center of the room, his arms held straight up above his bowed head with knots of thick, brown rope. Deep, infected slashes ran across his back, the wounds suppurating and spreading in black patches. His entire body appeared like a roadmap of torture marks, bruises and clotted pus. All around the concrete walls of the room, someone had glued thousands of dismembered eyeballs. Most of them looked like they came from animals, but not all. Many were no more than rotting drippings of vitreous fluid and gore, yet others looked fresh. The smell of septic shock and decomposition hung thick and rank in the air, and I realized that not all the fetid odors in the house had come from the corpse of Mother God. From a dark corner, a silhouette stepped forward. I saw the form of my brother, his dark eyes blazing. He looked totally unharmed. He gave me a crooked half-smile. "Lee. Holy shit. You're okay," I said, surprised. He nodded patiently. "Father God is in charge of the learning room," Llama said. I looked between him and Lee, confused. Then the realization hit me like a bolt of lightning. "You're not being held prisoner here?" I asked, a rising sense of horror gripping my heart with a suffocating strength. Llama laughed at that, a sardonic, low chuckle of mirth and sadism that echoed through the room. The torture victim stirred, raising his bloody head slowly. I saw one of his eyes had swollen shut. Blood dribbled from a purple lump the size of an orange. His other eye opened, looking watery and unfocused. "Help me," he whispered in a voice choked with pain. Lee stepped forward. In a flash, he struck out at the bound man, bringing a fist up into his jaw. I heard a crack of bone as a tooth flew out of his bloody, swollen mouth. "Stop it. What the hell are you doing?" I asked, still holding Davy in my arms. Davy hid his face into my chest, not looking at the torture and dismemberment surrounding us on all sides like a tomb. He tried to sell us out to the men in black, Lee said, pointing an accusing finger at the naked man as he spat blood on the cold concrete floor. We caught him talking to them. What the hell are men in black? I asked. Lee looked hard at me. We don't really know. They keep showing up here in flashy, colorful cars. They always wear sunglasses to cover their bulging eyes. Sometimes they have extra fingers, and they're always long and twisted. They say they're from the US government, but they don't look like government agents to me. They wear garish ties and colorful hats that no CIA agent would be walking around in, Lee said grimly. Since Mother God went into stasis, I've been leading the group. Before she fell asleep, we were interconnected souls. We think the men in black are sent from the Illuminati, Llama said from behind me. The naked man just shook his head, fresh streams of scarlet dribbling down his chin. I never talked, the man whispered. Father God caught you red-handed. Llama screamed in fury. Lee looked like he would strike the man again, his dark eyes narrowing to slits, but at that moment, Hope ran down the cold, concrete steps, waving her hands with manic energy. They're back. They're at the front door, and they want to see you. Hope cried, looking at Lee for guidance. Lee's face went pale, his eyes widening. The three of them ran upstairs, leaving me alone with the naked man in the room full of rotting eyeballs. Arm yourselves. I heard Lee scream overhead, the words echoing down the cold steps. I glanced back at the naked man, who was hanging unconscious again, the weight of his body dragging painfully against his arms. The sound of shooting reverberated from upstairs in a deafening series of bangs. Someone started screaming in pain. They're coming in. I heard Lee yell, his voice tinged with a kind of fear I had never heard there before. I ran upstairs, taking the cement steps 2 at a time, eager to get out of the learning room and out of this house of such madness. I slammed through the door, sending it smacking against the wall with a clatter. The smell of blood and gunsmoke hung thick in the air, mixing with the omnipresent odor of death that permeated the house. Aurora was laying sprawled in front of the threshold, half of her face blown away and charred to a smoking heap of burnt flesh. It didn't look like the work of any bullet. A spreading puddle of blood wreathed her head like the halo. Llama lay in the corner, half of his chest blackened and exposed. His face was a mask of sweat. His clothes had melted to his skin. With wide, unbelieving eyes, he gurgled, rasping and suffocating. The smell of cooked human flesh and burnt hair hung thick in the air. I thought I could see his heart beating through the blackened gore of his torso. The rest of the cultists lay dead or dying. I saw the children gathered together in a corner, hugging each other, their faces pale. Their cries mixed with the gurgling of the dying. The front door stood wide open, letting the bright light stream in from the dirt parking lot. Silhouetted in the center of this effulgence stood the silhouette of a tall man in a suit. I felt like I couldn't focus on him, as if the lights grew brighter if I tried to look in that direction. He stopped into the room, causing his features to come into focus. It seemed the spell had broken as quickly as it had started. 2 more men in black suits followed him a moment later. At first glance, they seemed normal enough from a distance, anyways. And yet, my horror grew as I stared closely at the newcomers. Their faces looked as smooth and perfect as a glass pane. They each had a pair of expensive, black sunglasses. All of the hair on their bodies appeared to be missing, even their eyebrows. They all wore brightly colored, garish ties and undershirts that didn't match their black suits at all. They had no lips. Instead, they looked like they had drawn a crude facsimile of them with blood-red lipstick. Their fingers were long and twisted, looking as if they had far too many joints. Each tapered into points. I realized with increasing unease that they had no fingernails, no lines on their palms. Like their faces, their hands almost looked as if they were made of white marble, free from all lines and imperfections, gleaming with an inhuman smoothness. The man in the front removed his sunglasses. I saw his eyes were alien, monstrous things. They bulged from their sockets, the membranes looking as tight as a snare drum and ready to burst. Long, slitted black pupils ringed by irises, the sickly yellow of a suppurating wound, stared out at me. "Are you with these humans?" he hissed in a low voice that seemed to split and distort. "Are you a follower of the one they call Mother God?" "No. We're innocent," I pleaded. "I have no idea what's going on here." Davy wailed in my arms, his small face pinched with terror. The man in black put a long, gnarled finger on Davy's forehead. The boy instantly went silent, his eyes suddenly taking on a faraway, glazed look. "That is certainly fortuitous," their leader gurgled. "For Mother God was a thief, stealing our secrets. Thankfully, most humans will regard her as insane and rambling, but we can never be too careful, can we? Not with secrets." The S sound of the last word dragged on until it exploded into a reptilian hissing. I realized all three of the men in black had their smooth, marble-white jaws hanging open. Serpentine tongues flicked out as they hissed in unison. I backpedaled away in terror, seeing the back door of the cabin standing open. The corpses of the cultists littered the floor all around me, puddles of blood spreading under their slowly cooling bodies. In the corner, Llama still twitched, his bloody face a mask of confusion and agony. "I'm not involved in this," I said to the leader, hugging my son tightly. "I didn't shoot at you guys when you came in. I just came here to check on someone, but he's dead now, so you are involved," the leader said. "You've seen too much." He had his small, toy-like ray gun by his side. It looked like it was made out of some gleaming silvery material that constantly shone with an inner light. "Put the child down in the corner with the others," he demanded. I just shook my head. "We will not harm the children. These are too young to speak or understand anyway." The two men in black behind the leader stepped forward, raising their small, toy-like guns at me. I trembled inwardly. The leader came forward, looking as if he would rip Davy right out of my arms. But, at that moment, chaos broke out. I saw a blur of sudden movement from the corner. Llama's dying, glazed eyes glittered with an ineffable surge of joy and fanaticism. Crawling forward towards the men in black, I saw he had a pistol in one trembling hand. I tried not to look, staring into the leader's reptilian eyes instead. Okay, I said slowly, pretending to put Davy down. At that moment, a series of gunshots rang out, deafening in the enclosed room. The men in black all spun towards Llama, seeing his mutilated, bleeding form only 9 or 10 feet away. Llama's bullets hit the leader in the neck, causing a waterfall of blood to surge down the leader's garish clothing. But it wasn't any sort of blood I had ever seen before. It was as pale and white as the men in black skin, filled with what looked like tiny pieces of opalescent glitter. The other two instantly responded by firing their alien pistols back at Llama, sending orbs of cyclonic fire ripping through the air with the smell of ozone and smoke. I took the opportunity to flee towards the back door. The sounds of the gunshots and the eerie keening of the fireballs followed me all the way to my car. Parked next to me was the car the men in black had come in, a garish, bright orange VW Bug with federal plates on it. I flung open the door to my car, quickly put Davy in the passenger seat and rummaged in the glove box for my knife. I heard it click open. The house had gone silent by now. Knowing I was out of time, I ran toward the VW Bug, stabbing at the two tires on the driver's side. I heard the hissing of air as they quickly started deflating. I hopped in my car, hearing the doors slam open behind me. Two of the men in black ran out, shooting balls of fire at my car. I heard one ping loudly against the truck, sending the car fishtailing wildly. Davy screamed in terror, certainly traumatized by this horrid experience. After nearly crashing, I managed to right the car. Putting the accelerator down as far as it would go, I fled that place of nightmares, seeing balls of fire smashing the trees all around me as I went. Story: The Sick Buttar. I hear the laughter as I enter the building. It's as if the sick bastard wants me to know exactly where he is. That's fine, I'm coming for him. I've been on his trail for a week. combing through these rundown steel mills, docks, and shipyards. This will be the 10th kid. The last, if I have anything to say about it. Once upon a time, the mild-mannered Adrian Opsted was a janitor at the illustrious Eden City Museum of History, cleaning up in the wake of tour after tour. Standing guard over the trash receptacles as a sentinel of cleanliness, now he takes and kills children. Pretty far from the mop and bucket, aren't we, Adrian? I raise my 1911, pointing it directly into the darkness. I can only imagine all the twisted steel and cold furnaces that surround me. I move around quickly, trying to keep my lumbering form from bumping into loose metal. He's gonna be surprised when he sees my mug. I pass an old sink with a broken mirror hanging above it. What I can make of myself isn't pretty. Dark brown hair cut short, revealing a face that was stitched back together by some of the finest medics the good OL could provide. It's a face even my mother couldn't love. She was repulsed when I came back from the war. I look on the outside how I feel on the inside. Scarred and burned, thanks to Nazi mortar fire. He's making this game of hide and seek easy. The amount of noise he's making could wake the dead. I even see light flickering from a room down the hallway to my right. I waste no time and rush in. The scene before me is straight out of a nightmare. The heat of the candles hits my face as I enter. Adrian kneels in a cloud of green mist before a mass of wriggling flesh and limbs. Giant eyes lock onto mine, and I fall against the door jamb. Head spinning, the only thing I manage to spurt out is a question: what kind of hell could spawn such a thing? I'm back in Bastogne. The vast dark forest covered in white snow, a contrast like good and evil. The blistering cold wind goes through me right before soul-shattering thunder erupts from my left. We're being shelled by the Krauts. I get lucky when the smoke clears. I'm okay. The same can't be said for Sergeant Mott, who was in the foxhole next to me only seconds ago. I think I can make out a portion of his head and shoulder hanging from a tree directly behind me. I keep my head down and pray to the Almighty. I feel something scrapping at my boots. I open my eyes and peer deeper into my foxhole. Then I see it, the rows of teeth, all white, jagged, and cracked. I realize then I'm in more danger than I could possibly imagine, as I'm swallowed up kicking and screaming into this maw. I feel my flesh being torn by razor-sharp fangs. I hear the popping sound of my legs being ripped from my pelvis over my own screams. My last sight before it goes dark is what is left of Sergeant Mott looking at me with those glazed dead eyes. From what is left of his jaw, I can make out a grin. It's only after the pain and a flash of light through my brain do I come to. My Weissen steadies, I focus on what's in front of me. I notice the wooden frame and the sheen of the oil paint. That monster is just a painting, and a damn ugly one at that. Adrian must have stolen it from the museum in between snatching kids. He is in the middle of the room giggling and muttering to himself, while he kneels over a bowl filled with sticks and smoke. The smoke drifts from the bowl and lingers at our feet. I speak slowly and clearly so this crazy son of a bitch can understand. I will not be repeating myself with this psycho. Rise to your feet, then turn and face me, Adrian. He does just that. His limbs pop and snap like he is breaking them just to go straight. Adrian laughs hysterically as he stands. I see the pool of blood and pieces of red flesh at his feet before I see the blade in his right hand. That blade is a wicked thing. Jagged and long. Looks like it was found in a scrap heap, more trash than deadly weapon. I think back to shrapnel that they pulled from me after the blast. When Adrian finally turns to face me eye to eye, I see that I'm the only one of us with a pair of peepers. He looks like he has carved all his features off. Just a blank slate of bone and blood. The pile under him is his. The only things left on his mug are a set of lips hanging loosely over yellowed teeth. I can still see you, Rourke, Adrian sputters. How the hell do you even know who I am? My God gave me that little tidbit. Isn't she lovely, Rourke? Adrian starts to sway and points his jagged blade back to the painting. She's the great mother. That's supposed to mean something to me, reprobate? I ask, holding back the urge to put a round into what's left of Adrian's mug. Where's the girl? I'm losing my patience, and I've never been one to deal with crazy. Adrian's about as crazy as the whole asylum. The Great Mother did not want her, and I don't blame her. Adrian spins back to face me. She has finally requested that I join her at her side. I'm her loyal and loving son. Adrian moves forward, blade in one hand and bits of his own face in the other. He's giving me the only reason I need. I squeeze off a round. It hits point blank in the hollow spot that used to house Adrian's right eye. His head jerks back hard, he hits the floor. Damn it, where is the girl? I think to myself as I take in my surroundings, and then I hear the sobbing. Very faint and very quiet, but it's there. I stow my 1911 and move behind the painting of the monster, now covered in bits of Adrian's brain. I find a dusty green footlocker. I rush over to open it. I breathe a sigh of relief as I find the alive 9-year-old Barbara Horowitz looking up at me. I lift her from the trunk and tell her to close her eyes. She's seen enough madness for more than one lifetime. Carrying her out quickly, I catch one last glimpse at the painting. It must be the blood running down it, but I could have sworn that the beast in the painting was moving. We make it out of the steel mill right as the night sky opens. Here comes one of Eden's famous storms. It seems like it rains more in Eden than any city in the world. I tuck little Barbara under my coat, and we make it to my Lincoln parked near some overturned garbage cans. Got a good deal for her when I came back from the war. Don't know much about cars, but she starts every time I need her to, and that's good enough for me. We slide into the Lincoln, and I uncover Barbara from the depths of my overcoat. She is latched onto me. I tell her I'm taking her home. She'll be with her mommy and daddy real soon. She smiles, it's faint but it's there. We pull up to the house. It's a stately place. Very different from the one-bedroom apartment I rent and use as my office. Barbara's father is well off. He works for the museum, something to do with the art that comes in and out of that place. That's how I put it together that Adrian took little Barbara. He snatched her up thinking she was just a tourist, must have either didn't know or didn't care who her daddy was. Hard to put yourself in the shoes of a crazy person. An old doorman meets us at the top of the driveway. Umbrella in hand as little Barbara and I step out of the car. It's just now that I realize how I must look to this tiny girl. My 7-foot-tall frame and broad shoulders eclipsing the storming night sky. I'm a giant straight out of a fairy tale. She has no use for that umbrella, not a drop was getting to her while I stand over her. Her parents are overjoyed to see her return to their arms. She rushes to embrace her mother and father. I stand in the rain, my part in this is done. The only thing left for me to do is to collect my payment and crawl into a bottle back at the office. I was itching for the burn of the whiskey. The father, Franklin Horowitz, practically sprints over and grasps my hand. He's a fat little man. He's got to be one of those educated types who didn't join us on the front lines during the war. That's how it went, those who had nothing would to fight while those with money stayed behind and got richer. He disgusts me. Thank you, my good man, for returning our precious girl. I can't begin to tell you the relief we felt seeing her step out of your car. I just nod my head. I know what I've done, I've saved a young girl from a lunatic. Now where is my damn money? I think to myself. As if reading my mind, Franklin passes me an envelope. It's all there, and a little extra for the timely rescue. He stands as tall as he can to reach my shoulders to give me a pat. Like I'm his new best friend. He gets in closer. Did you happen to also find a painting? He looks nervous. Yeah, I found it. It's located across from the dead bastard that stole your little girl. I neglect to inform him of the new coating of blood and brains that rest on it. Now that I think about it, the new color might be an improvement. Outstanding news. I feared it lost. It's an extremely rare piece from an artist who just recently began showing his works. I'll have my men retrieve it post-haste. He turns and walks towards the house. My head is killing me. Whatever Adrian was burning in that bowl got me good. Sent me into a living nightmare. I'm going to ask the boys at the precinct what that stuff was. Make it my personal mission to never encounter it again. I see little Barbara peeking out of the front door. I give her a smile. If I was a betting man, I'd say the kid's going to need to see a shrink. I've got my own fix for what's ailing me waiting for me back at my office. I shrug my soaked overcoat off in the doorway to my bedroom. A large bottle on my nightstand stands proud and unopened. I quickly snatch it up. The whiskey burns at first, but then warms my cold damp bones. I down half the bottle and sit on my cot. I tried sleeping on a bed when I got back from the war. It didn't work. The floor was fine except for bugs and rats. This standard issue cot I found in a pawn shop fixed that problem. I don't make enough money for a real home. Nice big house, driveway with bushes along the sides. This apartment with its leaking pipes, torn wallpaper, and stained carpet is as good as it gets for me. It's late, the booze is starting to kick in and my mind goes heavy. The best part of drinking myself to sleep is that I don't tend to dream. After tonight's episode with Adrian, I hope to God that this time is no exception. The pounding on my front door jolts me awake. I'm in a chair in the corner of the place, gun in hand. Now that's odd, I've never been one to sleepwalk. I holster the 1911 and stand. A headache hits me hard, like a ton of bricks just landed on my shoulders. I stumble to the sink and loudly expel the contents in my stomach. Black bile fills the bottom of my sink. More pounding on the door. Some asshole really wants my attention. Or a right crossed to the jaw. I'm coming, you prick. I'm really showing off those manners Mama Rourke instilled into her little boy. I swing the door open to find 2 uniforms staring at me. What can I do for you officers this fine morning? I wipe a little of the black from the side of my mouth. I must look presentable when in company. It's 1 in the afternoon, Rourke. The officer on the left says. I recognize him immediately. Officer Owens, if you wanted to speak to me, you could have called. I have a phone. I turn back into my office and realize it's a mess. My desk is turned over, and papers are all over the floor. I think I have a phone somewhere. The officers look less than pleased to be here. Owens speaks up. Rourke, we found the body at the steel mill. You really did a number on him. Whoa, let's slow down a minute, Owens. I lean on the wall to counter the spinning of the room. I only shot the psychopath. He carved himself up. I choked down some more bile. I was just about to write up the report, then send it down to the station. Owens peers around me into my office at the overturned desk. Yeah, sure you were Rourke. The other guy doesn't say a word, just stands there staring at me. He looks young, must be a rookie to the department. He is transfixed at the state of me. I've been a walking freak show since the war. I snap my fingers in his face. He goes for his pistol. Owens steps between us. Rourke, God damn it. Owens puts his weight into my chest and manages to push me back into my place. I don't even fight him. God, I want to go back to sleep. My head is ringing as he shouts and shoves. You absolute prick, I should have the rookie take you in for that slight. Owens turns to the other officer. Go work the hall, give us a damn minute and cool your head. Story, a run-of-the-mill horror story. Lester and his wife of 10 years, Emily, recently moved into a very large Victorian house in rural Maine. Their marriage had been ripped to shreds by the death of their 5-year-old son, and while they loved each other, they had not been coping well. Lester developed an anger problem, while Emily drank a bottle of wine every night. Seemingly everything reminded them of their late son, and Emily had bad dreams every night about the moment she saw her boy being hit by a pickup truck driven by a bigoted man in his 40s. One night, Lester found himself unable to sleep, and wound up sitting on the edge of his bed staring into the wall as if something was about to crawl out of it. Emily could not sleep either, but she remained lying on her side with her eyes half open. Lester, what are you doing? It's 2 a.m. Lester groaned and lit up a cigarette. I can't sleep. I keep thinking about what went wrong with our Toby. I couldn't run fast enough, despite going on 4-mile runs every morning. Emily sat up and stared at her husband. "Why are you smoking?" "Because I have writer's block," Lester barked. "I am a somewhat recognizable novelist who publishes a whole book every 7 years, but these days, I can hardly string together a few sentences. Trust me, I know all about disappointment. As a stay-at-home painter, I sell 1 piece a month, and I have depression. Still, we can afford this beautiful home," so why their conversation was promptly cut off by a loud thud coming from the hallway. They looked up in silence before another thud rang out. Lester put on his slippers and bolted towards the door. "What are you doing?" asked Emily. "What do you think?" "I'm going to go see what that sound was." He almost went to the closet for his gun, but then he realized that a weapon would not be conceivably useful in that sort of situation. He figured that if there was something out there, he could yell loud enough for it to run away. So, he simply cleared his mind and exited the room. Lester stepped carefully down the hallway before noticing that a door to his right was open. He knew he closed that door before going to bed, so he thought this was strange. Still, without a second thought, he entered the room and closed the door behind him. The room was pitch black, but he did not think to turn on the lights. Instead, he retrieved a cigarette lighter from the pocket of his sweatpants and flicked it on. From the other end of the room, he heard a faint growling sound. He thought that it must be a dog that the previous homeowners left behind, so he approached it without hesitation. With each step, the growling got louder and louder, but this did not deter him. He thought this dog must have been starving, so he bravely pushed on. When he got closer, lightning flashed and he could not believe what was illuminated. It was not a dog at all, but rather, an alien. He realized that this made a lot of sense in that it did not really need to make sense. It was an alien, so that was all he needed to know. The alien reached out, and both of them disappeared. The next morning, Emily decided to move back to New York City. She did not attempt to sell the house nor pack any of her things. She just got in her modest sedan and drove away, crying as the trees passed by. Story: a short Jurassic Park horror story. I couldn't believe I had gotten a call after I had already settled down for the night. I drove my work-issued Jeep through the jungle maintenance roads of the park. Heavy rain was pouring down on my windshield, large trees towering over me on either side, as darkness enveloped the road. The only light helping me see ahead was the high beams on the top of the Jeep. I had heard over the radio that the forecast report for tonight and the rest of tomorrow was nothing but rain. I couldn't help but audibly groan and roll my eyes thinking about the weather. At least I'd be inside. But still, my conscience wanted to complain that I had to fix a snap in the line powering the west side of the island. Although, my brain quickly justified it, reminding me that I would be getting a bonus for doing this, or so I was told. The Jeep's engine groaned as I slowly drove it up the hill towards the geothermal plant. I parked it just a few feet away from a side door to the large concrete building. I noted that it was covered with a network of steel red pipes that wrapped around the structure and extended over the top of the roof. I clumsily threw on my windbreaker and stepped out of the vehicle. The rain was pouring down so fiercely it blew sideways. I shielded my face from the wet droplets that were raining down like someone spraying me with a garden hose. I hastily made my way to the back of the vehicle, squinting the entire time. I looked around for my VHS camera, flashlight, and tool belt, which was quite a tremendous task considering it felt like I was effectively being waterboarded and could barely see. I turned to the direction I believed to be the building and made a beeline for the door, the gravel crunching underfoot. Approaching the door, I swiftly inserted my key, turned the doorknob, and slipped inside. Despite the damp and cold interior of the building, I was grateful to have a barrier between me and that horrendous weather. I shut the door with a loud thud, turning around to lean against it before letting out a sigh of relief. I pulled off my once dry windbreaker, tossing it onto a wooden crate beside me. Using my shirt to wipe my wet face, I retrieved my work belt and fastened it around the loops of my pants, securing it in the middle. With a click, I turned on my flashlight and scanned the room. This room served as a side office, connecting to the other rooms on the first floor and acting as the only entry point after work hours. Additionally, it had a staircase leading to the service tunnels below. I aimed the flashlight to locate the record button on my camcorder. Finding it quickly, I pressed it with a click. The tape began to hum, and I couldn't help but wonder why we needed to bring camcorders after hours. I assumed it was some safety protocol, so I brushed off the thought. After all, I was just a maintenance engineer responsible for making sure the plant supplied power to the animals' enclosures, and also would soon cater to the wealthy visitors who would flock to see these animals when the park opened. So with that in mind, I cautiously descended the stairs and entered the heart of the machine. After reaching the bottom of the stairs, I walked for a little bit before slowly approaching an intersection of linking hallways. I proceeded towards the generator room, assuming that starting at the source and then following the designated power line that supplies the west side of the island was the best approach to find where the line had snapped. I found myself in the generator room, where the low humming of the machine bounced off the walls, creating a strange reverberating sound. I directed my flashlight towards the generator, locating the designated line in question, and started following it. I began hoping for the best-case scenario, where it might have just been slightly frayed from something accidentally damaging it. The worst-case scenario would be severe damage caused by who knows what. This situation raises the question of what could have caused this issue. It couldn't have been an electrical overload, as there are specific runoff lines designated to handle large build-ups of electricity, which should charge the emergency power generators all across the park. So, the possibilities are either sabotage by someone within the park or something that entered the plant and caused the damage. I rounded the corner to the left hallway, and after walking for a short minute, I found where the wire had been damaged. Looking at the line, one of my suspicions was correct. This wire looked mangled, torn apart by what appeared to be claw marks. Not from a large animal, but from something slightly smaller. This wasn't gonna be a quick fix. I grabbed the necessary tools and began fixing the line, slowly and meticulously piecing it back together. I was about 20 minutes into the fix when I started to wish I had brought my Walkman. I could be listening to some tunes right now, but instead I'm stuck listening to the faint hum of the generator and the hoots of some animal. Wait a minute. Why am I hearing an animal down here? It was hard to tell where the sound was coming from. It almost sounded like an owl. But that couldn't be right. Of all the indigenous life on the island, there weren't any owls. Only birds that thrived in tropical conditions. The hoots grew louder, and I knew the source was getting closer. Panic set in, and I began to worry that it might be an escaped dinosaur. I scrambled to find somewhere to hide. I shined my light over a small grate in the wall. Perfect. A vent large enough to hide inside. I slowly pried the grate open, carefully placed it to the side, and slid inside the vent, followed by carefully dragging the grate back into its original spot. I quickly turned off my flashlight and stayed absolutely still, trying to make as little sound and movement as possible. The hoots sounded ever so near as a faint new sound could be heard, the clicking of feet on concrete. I peered out through the slits between the grate and saw two scaly legs in the darkness. The legs were accompanied by muscular thighs attached to a fairly large body. It was hard to make out what the creature was, but it was tall, standing around at least 17 feet and measuring around 15 feet in length. The creature raised its head and let out a hoot, the sound echoing eerily in the confined space. It was then that I noticed two protruding crests running along the top of its head from the snout all the way to the back. I remembered this dinosaur from the tour, although this one seemed bigger than the ones we had seen earlier. A small carnivore no bigger than maybe 5 feet at most, but this one dwarfed them in comparison. Could this be how big they really get? We were told that these are ambush predators and they don't actively hunt prey. So it made me wonder if this creature was the reason the power line was mangled. I had too many questions and not enough options to help me get out of this situation. Perhaps if I could just get to my jeep I could radio the nearest ranger station and call in a team to tranquilize the animal. As I contemplated my escape plan, I accidentally shuffled in the tight space, creating a noise that reverberated loudly through the ventilation shaft. The animal snorted, and its head snapped in the direction of the grate. I froze, my heart pounding so loudly that it felt almost audible. I struggled to calm down. But that was proven rather difficult with a ferocious creature mere inches away from me. The animal's head slowly lowered level to the grate peering in. Its amber-colored eyes felt sharp. The darkness provided some cover, making me think that it couldn't see me if I didn't move, just like how the T-Rex's eyesight worked. I breathed a quiet sigh of relief as the animal eventually got bored and turned its attention back to something else. Once this is all over I am sleeping like a log, I thought to myself, though I knew my next shift was looming. However, lost in my thoughts about the end of this ordeal, I didn't notice the faint, strange green light I was basking in. I peered out through the grate to my sheer horror as the creature was now covered in green light. with stripes of green stretching from the back of its eye all the way to the end of the tail. There was even a red stripe running down its spine. I remembered learning about this process in high school. Certain animals had developed adaptability to darker conditions by producing bioluminescent light from their bodies. But the scientists in the lab had assured us during the tour that all the dinosaurs that are bred in the lab are as close to their prehistoric predecessors as possible, unless they were lying, and this is some kind of secret genetic experiment. The animal suddenly caught a whiff of something in the air, and it snarled before ruthlessly leaping forward in a single fluid motion, crunching something in its jaws. Whatever it had eaten squealed, and I could hear the bones snap and buckle under the weight of the beast's jaws. It swallowed its meal, hooted once more, and then ran off in the direction of the intersecting hallways. This creature appeared unusually aggressive, perhaps due to its bioluminescence. The best bet was to keep my guard up and carefully navigate my way out of the plant and back to my jeep. If I encounter that thing again, I highly doubt I'm going to have such a lucky fate. With caution, I opened the grate and crawled out into the hallway. I couldn't risk using my flashlight and revealing my position, so I had to rely on the faint lights above me and using the pipes beside me as a reference guide. Slowly and quietly, I retraced my steps through the intersecting hallways, climbing the stairs with every step carefully cushioned. As I neared the door I had entered through, I began to consider the likelihood of the creature escaping and potentially disrupting the ecosystem in the park. My hand hesitated over the doorknob. I realized that I had to lock this creature inside and find a way to contact the ranger station from within the plant. Then it struck me, the plant's main control office had a direct phone line to the engine facility on the northwest side of the island. If I could make that call, they could send in a team to neutralize the dinosaur. I turned around, facing the daunting staircase that seemingly led to nowhere, and in one final decision, I began my descent downwards once more. I reached the intersection and continued straight to the generator room. Upon entering the room, the air was filled with the sounds of a low hum, providing some cover for my actions. However, I wasn't taking any chances. I circled around the large industrial generator to the other side of the room. There, I spotted a small room built into the wall a few feet off the ground with a ballistic glass window. This room housed the main control unit, which powered the generator and most of the plant. It was also where I expected to find the emergency helpline. I ascended a couple of stairs to reach a metal door situated to the side. I swiped my key card and the metal door slid open smoothly. Stepping inside, I swiped my card once more to secure the door behind me. Making my way over to the control unit, I located a flashing button and pressed it. In response, a deep alarm blared once and the door beside me locked, along with most of the main doors to the plant. At this point, that thing was effectively locked in here with me, or so I hoped. I turned away from the unit, facing away from the window, and walked over to a red phone hanging on the wall. I picked it up and dialed the number. The phone began to ring. As each passing ringtone entered my ear, anxiety welled up inside me. I heard a click and a man with a faint accent spoke through the line. "Engine here. What seems to be the problem? I need assistance at the geothermal plant. There's a dinosaur that has made its way inside, and it's extremely aggressive. I trapped it inside the plant with me," I spoke as calmly as I could. "Understood, I'm dispatching a couple rangers." "Were you able to identify it?" the man asked. "Sorry, I'm not good at identifying dinosaurs." I replied, "Copy that. Listen to me very carefully, find an exit and carefully make your way there, wait outside till the rangers can reach your current position." "Do you understand?" the man spoke firmly. "Yes, understood, but there's something strange about this one. It's similar to one of the dinosaurs on the tour, but it's much bigger and it has bioluminescent scales that make it glow." As I was explaining, I noticed a faint, familiar green light basking me. My heart dropped as I slowly turned around to see the same dinosaur from earlier, staring at me from behind the window. This time, it could definitely see me, with that sharp amber-colored eye fixed on mine. It felt like it was peering into my soul. The dinosaur snarled, its lip curling, and it took a step back. "Sorry, you said something about it having bioluminescence? Hello?" the man continued to ask. The phone slipped out of my hand and dangled by the cord. I felt my body trembling in fear, but tried to assure myself that the ballistic glass was impenetrable, not even a slug round from a shotgun could breach it. However, my assurance quickly crumbled when the animal rammed its massive body against the glass, causing a crack to form. I backed up against the wall. Hello, are you there? What was that noise? The man beckoned through the phone. I picked up the phone and began screaming frantically, "You have to come quickly. It found me, and it's trying to break the glass." The animal repeatedly backed up and slammed its body against the window, weakening its integrity. A few more attempts and it would be able to reach me inside. "The Rangers are coming fast, please just hold out for a little longer," the man attempted to assure me. All sense of security was lost when the dinosaur backed up further and, in one final motion, rammed the glass, causing it to shatter on the floor. The dinosaur hissed as it tried to reach me, snapping its jaws. The window inhibited it from coming in any further, as it was too small for the creature to fit through. It stepped back, staring at me. Suddenly, it cocked its head back, and I was flashed by something bright red. I shielded my eyes. When my eyes finally adjusted, I looked back to see two bioluminescent frills sticking out of its neck just behind its head. They rattled like snakes, and the dinosaur began to hiss. It opened its mouth, and I covered my face again. All of a sudden I felt something warm and sticky hit my chest. I looked down to see faintly green, glowing saliva dripping from it. The fumes from the spit made my eyes water as it smelt like rotten flesh. "Ada for the Rangers is about 8 minutes from now, till then you're on your own," the man said. I hung up the phone and carefully made my way to the corner of the room, keeping my eye on the dinosaur the entire time. I didn't see where I was going when I accidentally bumped into something. I turned around to see a locker. I quickly opened it and, to my surprise, found a prodding stick in there. I grabbed it and turned it on, the low hum of the electricity sparking between the two copper prongs. I turned around towards the creature once again, and it started hissing once more. I decided to take my chances and charged forward, driving the prodding stick into its mouth and pressing the button. It crackled, causing the dinosaur to jolt and rear its head while screeching loudly, before it backed up and ran off. I seized the opportunity and hopped over the ledge, with pieces of glass digging into my palm, but that was the least of my worries. I rushed out of the room and through the hallway, passing by the intersection and up the stairs. However, my heart sank when I reached the top and found a security blast door blocking my exit. I tried lifting it, but it wouldn't budge. I couldn't afford any roadblocks at this moment. I needed to get out of here now. But then, I recall the window in the main lobby of the plant. I quickly turned around and sprinted down a hallway to find myself in the lobby. I opened the door and stepped inside. Across the room, I spotted the window just above the main door. I pushed a desk in front of it and climbed on top. After unlatching the window, I pushed it open and saw the night sky. To my surprise, the storm had passed, and even better, I noticed headlights at the bottom of the hill. I yelled and waved my arms, hoping they would see me. My heart swelled with relief as I had finally escaped this relentless situation. However, my elation was short-lived, as a chilling breeze, reeking of death, brushed the nape of my neck, freezing me in terror. I turned around once more, only to meet the gaze of the relentless dinosaur that had been tormenting me. Its face was level with mine, and as it cocked its head back, I braced myself for what I thought was its dreaded spitting attack. However, something far more sinister occurred. A sensation akin to daggers pierced either side of my head. To my horror, I realized that my head was now trapped between the jaws of this monstrous beast. With a swift motion, the dinosaur swung its head, sending me hurtling through the air. The gruesome sounds of flesh being torn from my face filled my ears as I crashed into an unknown object. The impact struck my spine, rendering my legs entirely numb and paralyzed. Desperation coursed through me as I attempted to crawl, but a searing pain slashed across my back like a sharp knife. In unbearable agony, I cried out, lying on my back, helpless. When I mustered the strength to look up, I found those malevolent eyes fixated on me. The dinosaur flared its frills and unleashed another torrent of spit, this time landing directly on my face. The burning sensation in my eyes far surpassed any discomfort I had felt earlier. It was as if someone had poured acid on them. I writhed in excruciating pain, screaming in torment. When I opened my eyes, everything was a hazy blur. I realized that I was now blind. The jaws of the dinosaur once again encircled my head, and there was nothing I could do. The grim reality of my impending doom loomed over me. In my final moments, I recollected my earlier thoughts about the sleep I had hoped to enjoy when this whole ordeal was over. It seemed that I would be indeed getting that rest. I closed my eyes as the crushing weight of the creature's jaws sealed my fate. Story, barn loft, horror story? I stopped counting the days after I got around 15. I would have kept going, but I couldn't. I had lost all hope. We stopped wondering if jumping down to escape was an option after watching two boys try to make a break for it. They injured their legs so bad, they couldn't get up, and we watched and dragged them away from our sight. We didn't see them again. One by one, the companions I had made came and went, until some of them stopped coming back to the loft altogether. They had been there longer than me, but I knew my time to go where they went was coming soon. Whenever I heard his ladder clang against the loft, I panicked, only remembering to breathe when I wasn't next. Normally when the ones who were taken came back, they never said anything more than a few mutters about experiments. They stayed like that, unmoving, barely talking, until they were taken down again. One girl was able to tell a bit more about what had happened. He would take them into a room that looked almost like one at a hospital, strap them down onto a table, and put an IV into their veins, which coursed an unknown substance into them. He said it would change them. There was more she wasn't telling us, and I couldn't tell if she'd stopped talking because she couldn't remember or just didn't want to relive it. We never knew his motive until it was evident that a couple who had come back had noticeably changed. The look in their eyes was wilder, they moved in awkward, jerky movements, they weren't human anymore. The rest of us stayed far away from them for as long as we could, unsure of the better option, becoming them or disappearing forever. We didn't have a choice, but the thought of one or the other was almost as terrifying as our situation. It wasn't hard to pick up on his schedule. He might have been mad, but he was methodical. The plan was to wait for him to leave with his tray of tools, none of which I recognized. He always took a long time to clean them. We didn't know exactly where that was, only that it was outside the barn. I didn't know whether to be anxious or flattered that he took the time to clean them up before using them on his next experiment. After he had left with the tray, we were to crawl out the hole in the wall where multiple kids had unknowingly teamed up to tear away at the old boards of the wall when he wasn't there. It wasn't very noticeable on the inside, because we'd just put the boards in front of the hole and hide it. Even though he kept us in a loft, making it so we couldn't jump down on the inside, the outside proved to be easier. Through the hole, we were able to see a small roof right there that we would be able to get on to use to get onto the ground. I wasn't as optimistic as everyone else. I had almost started to look forward to my turn with him and wanted to know what would happen. I was still terrified of him, though. I saw what the stuff did in the IV did to the others before they were killed or turned into a mutant. It wasn't something to look forward to, but what else was I supposed to hope for when escape hadn't been an option? When the time came to execute our plan, I may have actually felt a twinge of optimism, though I found myself saying it wasn't going to work. But, after all that time of being here, watching everyone around me disappear, maybe I was finally getting out. We uncovered the hole and the first person went through. Everything was going as well as it could. Until that first person on the outside fell through the roof we were supposed to get on. In a panic, someone else went out, too, maybe to see if it was possible to avoid falling through as well. They didn't and managed to lower themselves enough to safely jump onto the ground. This gave the rest of us hope. However, the crash of someone falling through the roof had not gone unnoticed. He was back inside now, yelling. I couldn't understand what he was saying, but I didn't need to. I was buzzing with so many thoughts and feelings, my blood turned cold as I realized this may not work. The sound of his footsteps urged us to get on with the next kid's escape. The clang of his ladder caused us to scramble to get through the hole before he could make it up there. I got through and saw the opening in the roof that had been left from the first escapee. It was barely avoidable, but the ones who went out before me had went around it and made it to the ground. I could, too. All I had to do was lower myself onto the ground. Even though they could have already run off, the ones who had made it out first waited, arms open, ready to catch me. It all happened so fast. I was pushed before I could figure out how to get down fast enough without hurting myself. I fell onto the people below me and someone else fell on top of me. It just had to be one of the mutants who had pushed me, now crushing me between them and the people underneath me. We were disoriented, the sunlight was blinding, and the sounds of nature suddenly around us overwhelming. Our limbs were a tangled mess. I couldn't tell my arms and legs from the people I landed on or the mutant kid weighing down on me. I heard words of praise and the mutant's weight lifted from my body. I thought we were free until I saw him. He caught us before anyone could make a move to get up. Story, beginning of the end horror story. My name is Jonas, and this is the story of how I survived the Great War of the 21st year. This is the story of my scars from the front lines. Born in the year 99, I was born under the name Josiah M. Springfield. My mother worked as a carpenter, and my father, well, I didn't see him much, but I heard strange stories about his adventures. Some said he was a pirate working off the coast of Florida. Others said he was a document repairman in a place called a material yard working on some secret project. Many people found and entered his garage, however, anyone who entered never came out again. I myself worked in a few different places where I was able to find work, because the war was going on. Jobs were very scarce, as were fuel and other necessities. Luckily I didn't drive and I run everywhere or ride my bike, which means I'm often bullied by people for not knowing how to drive, but this means that if I need to, I can run about 5 miles without getting tired because I'm not lazy and I'm extremely active. However, because of my strength, I was often beaten a lot, with them saying run faster than this girl, and sometimes they still do that because I'm weak. Like a cruel game, they signed me up for the 8th year of bombing, because they know the physical wound will heal, but the wound never leaves you. You will never forget the pain horror of war. But it was my sense of rightness that kept me going, and my epiphany. That would be the key to keeping me alive, amid the most hysteria since the early 2-wave years. Everything went well until one day, while eating breakfast, I received a letter and was assigned to the 580th Air Force under the sole command of Lieutenant Leaf. The war against the so-called furries was going terribly wrong, with bombing raids taking place in the skies every night over the small town of Handleton with a population estimated to be the size of an average football stadium. They liked to tokenize people. They used history as inspiration for their intimidation, mainly with documentaries about World War II. Using blueprints, they recreated old fighters with improvements they made perfect. Despite being intelligent furry people, they are easily distracted by something shiny. This was their main method against them until they created an injection that could transcend all dimensions, and all the ability to create them is distracted. I was assigned to a bomber crew of 25 people, and the plane was called Lucky 13. I was given badges and ordered to bomb 2 major cities with the crew, 2 cities which are called Owatan and Fur City. 2 hours passed and we were flying over the city of Owatan. The first commander in the drive shouted at us, "That's right, you worm. I want to see these bombs fall on this city so much that it hurts. I don't want to see a single inch of it left. Give these furries their own damn medicine. What do you say?" Everyone responded with a quick "Gura." As soon as the bombs began falling silently to the people and the giggles of the monstrous crew members were heard, the whirlwind of chaos broke out. Although on the bomber it was also easy to find one by one running to safety, even though it was almost architectural, when a nest was found and then, again, heard that cry and then said, Commander Look came back at us with unbelievable beaked faces, shouting at us I'd fly down there and finish the job. You good-for-nothings get down there and finish them off. And if I hear one of you, if that hairy bastard is saved, I will send the machine to an honorable military court. One by one, the men jumped out of the plane in perfect synchronization, chanting military tunes to stimulate themselves, until there was only one left. Me, and then there was the unmistakable sound of 300 caliber bullets stretching out the sides and the engine of Lucky 13, and it was now or never. I had to jump or I would die. I would know error. I prayed to God above and jumped out the back, and everything slowed down and started to almost stop. Is this where I die? I heard the noise of the terrifying Hyena Mk2 coming in above me. The propeller almost grazed my head, or 5 meters not far behind the Hyena was the famous Wasp Mk3. Both of these aircraft were 2 of the most fearsome aircraft models ever built by the Ardvakian military. Not far behind is the heavy cruiser Sea Serpent, weighing about 100 years, the most powerful and powerful. As pure as one can make by hand. As I continued to fall, watching my life flash before my eyes and the wind rustling my hair and passing through my ears, I heard a faint, yet distinct call, "He once." Again I heard what sounded like a woman's voice. "Hey you idiot, you will destroy the cement. Hey. What the hell, get them out." I woke up to find myself less than 200 meters above the ground and continuously rushing towards the ground, and I pulled my parachute at just the right moment. Fear and anxiety paralyzed me as I pulled it. My knees I comforted the house with a tremendous force, and I heard a tremendous pull and a sharp pain in both knees. The parachute pulled me through the roof. The pain was unimaginable. Finally, I slid down the house and hit the ground. I hit my head on the flower pot and felt myself being pulled inside. As I felt myself being pulled into this stranger's house, I could feel them struggling with the weight of my still body being pulled through the door, the occasional light coming on underneath. My closed eyes, blinking at an uneven pace, I placed on a certain bed. There was a strong smell, something I had never smelled before. I almost thought I had dipped my head in skunk urine mixed with pig manure. I inhibited waking up and screaming. The scream was delayed from where I was fallen to my fate. My heart was faster than ever. My anxiety was at its peak. I finally woke up and I couldn't see anything. There was an incomprehensible darkness that covered my face, even though it was drawn to the darkness like a moth to a lamp. I woke up, screaming with such excitement that my vocal cords felt like they might melt. The lights flashed from the intensity, and then the unintelligible sound of a door was smashed open, not echoing throughout the room with such intensity. I had never experienced this before. Finally, after what seemed like years of deep sleep, I heard a distant, barely audible voice. "Is that you? Or not?" He didn't expect that he would wake up so early. Let me postpone the search plan. My cell door opened. It took a long time for the light to penetrate every corner of the room. It was as if the room itself was bathed in light, absorbing every particle of light into the cushioned walls, like a chocolate connoisseur enjoying every moment of it. I wished I never woke up when I saw the state of the room. Every square foot of the room was covered in blood, organs, and feces, and I realized what that smell was when I first arrived, when light finally flooded into the padded psychiatric hospital-style cell, and when my eyes finally adjusted, I saw a woman, though she wasn't quite a woman. I can't determine the type. Story: Broken Lights, a short horror story. Her breathing was wheezed. Her pacing was quick, and her focus was everywhere. Sasha's adrenaline was spiking her heart and movements in a way that shouldn't be possible. Her energy was almost endless because of it. The screams of the hostile beings running after her were loud, ear-splitting, even sounds that would render someone's throat raw if attempted to replicate. Their footsteps matched her pace, if not quicker. Feet sprinting in the grass that shuffled from theirs and her own movements. The grass surface turned to cement. Her shoes clunked against the hard surface as she ran for her life. Dodging towering metal crates and screeching monsters, her way was blocked by a looming metal warehouse. Seeing no other option, she kept her pace up for its wide-open door. Hearing one of the creatures behind her grow ever so closer, feet getting faster and louder, breathing more quickly and heavier down her neck, she dove for it. The moonlight was masked by pure darkness, her body toppling to the cement ground of indoors, her flashlight shattering on the ground. Turning to look at the open door, she threw herself up. It screamed before she threw the door closed, turning the lock. Her breathing wheezed, shuddered as she slouched forward against it, resting her forehead against the door's surface. Her breathing was so strained it was difficult to pin it between her lungs begging for air or emotions taking over, and she was on the verge of crying. Either way, she was struggling. Her legs shook in weakness, the adrenaline fading and almost begging for her to collapse. She kept herself standing, however. Looking over her shoulder, she only just now realized that the building was completely pitch black. Her mind was too originally focused on escaping with her life still intact. Diving to her knees for the flickering flashlight on the ground, she picked it up. No. No. The glass was shattered, the light bulb inside flickering in an attempt to stay alive. She smacked its surface onto the palm of her hand in aggressive attempts. That only seemed to make it worse. With one more firm pound of it against the palm of her hand, it died. The light dimmed before the entire building shrouded her in complete darkness. Her breathing shuddered. She was completely defenseless against the Weavers. The Weavers. Human hybrid creatures of complete hostility. Broad-shouldered human beings who have succumbed to their form. Clothes ripped and tattered to almost nothing but rags. Skin is sickly pale, black bags under their glowing orange hungry eyes like goggles, hands and feet completely black like they were burned, nails so long that they could reach their knees without even bending over, ears sharp and pointed, and jaws split into arthropod-like mandibles, salivating, clicking and screeching in communication. Their motivation is unknown, and so is their origin, for what she knew. But the way they treat humans is cemented and true. Angry, hostile, and deadly. Some kill on the spot, others drag them away, never to be seen again. She was pursued by 3 of them in that chase. From the glance she got over her shoulder, 2 were male, and the other was female, easily distinguishable by their appearance and host. The people at the safe house told her it was a bad idea to go out by herself. "Sasha, you'll get yourself killed." She took it anyway. Sasha lifted her head, staring into the empty black void of the warehouse before her. Adjusting her black long hair, she reached into her pocket, pulling out her phone. She opened up the camera and pointed her phone to the darkness before her. With a press of her thumb, the camera flashed. With the camera flash, the terrain was revealed to her for only a second. Towering metal shelving units with wooden crates. She hated that she could only see for a split second. She hated the dark. She doesn't fear it itself. She fears what might be hiding inside it. She fears that something would just jump out at her the moment she presses that camera button. Despite the fear growing inside of her, she pressed on. She slowly stepped further into the darkness to accomplish her quest that she started the moment she stepped out of the safe house. To find her 2 missing kids. It has been hours since she has last seen them since this whole problem began. A part of Sasha wanted to look for a light switch, but in reality, that would be fruitless. The town is devoid of any power. The power plant was ambushed by the weavers, the phone tower was attacked and the radio tower's cords were cut. The town is stuck in a blackout. No lights, no power, no communication to the outside world. They were isolated, and the world was completely ignorant of what this town is currently going through. Pressing the camera button on her phone again, it flashed, exposing her path for another second. She was slowly treading down a narrow hallway of towering metal shelving units. But in the end, it was hard to tell where she was going since all she could see was just a wall of darkness in her path. She pressed it again, and her heart stopped for a second. Laying on the cement ground before her in that second-long flash was a pink ribbon. She dove to her knees, shock overcoming her as she gently scooped up the pink glistening ribbon. Her breathing shook as did her arms as she lifted the light little ribbon in her hands. Her daughter's ribbon. A ribbon fixed into a bow in the back of her head to make her hair ponytail, and here it was, laying on the ground and now clutched in her mother's hands. Lifting her head, looking forward, her heart stopped again. A shoe. A blue sneaker. Her son's sneaker. Sasha felt like she could cry. She buried her face into her daughter's ribbon, weeping for them. She could just imagine the situation they were in. Her daughter holding her brother's hand, leading him away, running, screaming, their young child's shrieks echoing in the warehouse before being caught by these monsters. She expected the worst to happen to them, and the thought would not go away. It brought tears to her eyes, water falling down her face as she sobbed into the tattered pink bow in her hands. A small part of her had a glimmer of hope. Maybe they were dropped in their escape. Maybe her bow wasn't fixed tightly to her head and unraveled off. Maybe her son's shoe slipped off during the run to safety. A choked breath jumped out of her as she lifted her head from the ribbon. Okay, she regained what little composure was left. Stay focused. With the mindset that they have escaped, she pressed on. She shambled through the darkness, occasionally pressing the camera on her phone to illuminate her way for a second. She stepped into a small opening, or at least it felt like she did. The thick air suddenly got thinner and it felt more open. Sasha shuffled forward through the dark, treading through a blanket of nothing. Her foot slipped on something wet. Her leg was thrown forward. Sasha gasped, toppling backwards. She crashed to the cement floor, the breath being knocked out of her. A groan growled from her throat as she sat up. She stared ahead to make out anything that she stepped on, but it was near impossible. Sitting up and shuffling to her knees, she lifted her phone to the floor, pointing the camera at it. With the press of a button, the camera flashed. Sasha's blood ran cold. Gore. Remnants of something tainted the floor before her. A pile of mutilated flesh, bone, and blood, rendering its shape completely unknown. Sasha flashed the light again. As if the first glance wasn't already sickening enough, the second one bore more answers. There were no traces of clothing in the fleshy mess. Instead, remnants of torn and ripped fur, which could mean it was an animal. An animal, sure, but as for what kind was completely beyond her. It was too messy, mangled, and bloody to tell. Movement caught her attention in front of her. Sasha's breathing spiked as she lifted her chin. For the time she has been in the dark warehouse, her eyes seemed to have adjusted ever so slightly. In her vision, she could make out two shelving units side by side. One of them shook. Sasha's breathing shuddered as she stood up. She stared at the wall of darkness in front of her. A low, gurgling, croaking noise filled the dead silence in the warehouse. Sasha slowly lifted her phone, pointing it at the darkness before her. Her arm shuddered as she did. A whimper came out of her as she bit the bottom of her lip. She pressed the camera button on her phone. The camera flashed. The weaver shrieked. Sasha screamed, the male creature shielding its eyes from the blinding flash of the camera light. Her feet reacted, attempting to back her away from the hostile creature. The humanoid creature strained a scream back, pouncing from its narrow space between shelving units onto her. She was forced to the ground as it straddled on top of her. Sasha struggled as the creature pinned her to the floor. A shriek left its throat and passed the 4 large mandibles of teeth in its mouth. She threw her arms into directions, but it kept a firm grip on them to keep her still. Its alive eyes narrowed inside the black bags under them as a strained noise left its throat, its salivating tongue flinging out of its mouth for a quick moment. It lurched its head forward. A blood-curdling scream echoed throughout the warehouse from the poor victim as the sharp teeth punctured the flesh of her neck. Bye and see you again in the next videos and stories.